What is up, everybody, and welcome to the All NBA Show, powered by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com/AllNBA. Tim Legler has the day off today. He is en route to Los Angeles, where he will be calling the Lakers game on Saturday. And also a scheduling note, because he also got assigned to the Lakers game on Monday. Perhaps that will be Luka's debut. So we have to move our playback, which we told you was going to be on Monday, our first one. We're moving it to Tuesday. It's going to be the exact same thing. You're going to want to sign up at playback.tv/all-NBA show. Go there now. If you sign up early, we will be handing out free passes to League Pass. So if you don't have League Pass, you can get it here for the next month. We've got passes for you. So go to playback.tv/all-NBA show. You can catch me and Legs giving live commentary as we flip through the different games going on 6 to 8 Eastern time on Tuesday. You're not going to want to miss it. And we'll have some special guests along as well, hopping in and just chopping it up. You can send in your questions and ask Legs directly. On today's show, we've been talking about trades a lot this week because obviously that's the top story in the NBA, shifting landscape. But there were some great games, and we're going to get back into the great games today. I got two very special guests. Bobby Karalla of DLLS. The Mavs got a huge win in Boston last night. They do not have Anthony Davis yet, so I want to get the scoop from him, both about that game, but also talk about the Mavs and where they go from here as a fan base, what he expects from the team, what the team is telling them their goals are for this season, and everything else. I think it'll be a very insightful conversation with Bobby. And we're also going to bring on Jon Krawczynski because the Timberwolves, to me, might be a sleeping giant. Who's separating in the West behind Oklahoma City? Who are the teams? Well, they're on a bit of a roll right now, and they have a lot of interesting things going on. So without further ado, let's get into our show today and have our conversation with Jon Krawczynski. Timberwolves get the win last night, 127-114 over the Houston Rockets. They trailed for most of this game till the final 7 minutes or so when Anthony Edwards said, you know what, enough of this. You could tell there was a little animosity. My guest wrote about that. Jon Krawczynski had a great piece up on The Athletic about the game last night. And look, man, two of the most physical teams in the league, Timberwolves and Rockets, in my opinion. And so when you get them together, it's going to be a grizzly bear fight. And that's what you got last night. And at the end, this came down to toughness for me. And Anthony Edwards said, you know what? I like to play tough too. And he took over that game in the clutch.
Yeah, that's what it was, Adam, is that, the Rockets invite conflict. Like, that's what they want to do. They want to get in your head. They want to beat you up, and they want to use their athleticism and everything to get to overwhelm you. And the Timberwolves, I think, are one of the few teams that are built for that. Like, I talked to Naz Reid after the game. He's like, I like that kind of party. Like, I want to have that kind of a game. And so I thought we've seen Dillon Brooks do it a million times with a million different stars, but you could tell that he and Jae'Sean Tate really wanted to try to set up a battle of wills with Anthony Edwards. And I'll tell you, I've seen Ant have a look in his eye in the playoffs. I've had in big moments, but last night was unique. Like, he was like, enough of this. Like, I'm coming right at your neck, and I'm going to do it. And 16 points in the fourth quarter, big threes, attacking the rim, getting to the line. He had 90 points in the back-to-back games. Just remarkable stuff from him.
It's funny, man, because this game, some teams, like the physicality, you worry they're going to wilt from it. Mm-hmm. The fear is I'm watching this game, and I already knew the outcome, but as I'm watching it, I was almost sitting here thinking, Jaden McDaniels is going to get a tech. Anthony Edwards is going to get a tech for going too far up. It's like the intensity. And they would score a tough basket and then push the limit of how much trash talk you could do. So it was some teams wilt, some teams get too hyped up. The Timberwolves towed that line last night, I thought.
Yeah, I had talked to Chris Finch about that after the game because they are a team that can get over their skis a little bit, that can just get wound up, and Ant gets a lot of texts. Jaden has a short fuse, and I thought they did a really good job of walking that line last night. I think that they used the intensity to fuel them, but it didn't derail them. And so their ability to kind of get into the fight, but not get knocked out because of it, or not punch themselves out because of it, was a huge factor in that game. And it was a wrestling match, and they just outlasted the Rockets. And the Rockets are missing two starters, so are the Timberwolves with Randle and Divincenzo. Right. So it's kind of an even fight.
When we just I'm putting you on the spot now because we're just talking about physical teams. When we talk about, and I'm still here, my camera sometimes does this thing where it goes crazy on me. But when we talk about the most physical teams in the NBA, I think Houston and Minnesota might be my number one, number two. Who else do you think is in the conversation for most physical team?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I wonder now about Dallas with AD
Yeah,
and Gafford and PJ Washington. Like that seems like a good is going to be a team that can really bump with you and get with you. The Lakers are going to have to be that way. I think. I don't know if they can do it.
in a different way. Yeah, in a
Yeah.
different way.
But I would say, yeah, I mean, I think Dallas is that way. I think Boston gets into you a different way physically, but not
Yeah.
I don't think it's on the level of Minnesota and Houston. I mean, they are brass knuckles. Like they want to be in that kind of battle. They want a loose whistle, as you know, from the Denver series in the playoffs. Like that's where they're at their best, is when there's a lot of contact allowed and you can get in there and bring some sharp elbows and go for it.
I went through the list of teams and I thought Orlando, who's on a
Yeah,
huge slide
Orlando.
right now,
Mhm.
Orlando has that physicality top to bottom. But outside of that, some of the teams you're talking about, like New York, Hart is physical, OG Anunoby
Yeah,
is physical, but the other guys aren't.
right.
Denver, Jokic is physical, Aaron Gordon is physical, but your wings and your guards are not. So some
Mhm.
teams have players, but I think the Magic, the Wolves, and the Rockets are the only teams to me that are complete physical top to bottom. And it honestly is a big part of their identity, but it's also a big part of why, as I look at the standings out west and just try to sort through who am I buying and who am I not, every team is almost in the same tier in the West, in my opinion. They're top
Mhm.
to bottom in the same tier. And so when I try to think about who separates, that physicality to me matters because we know that's going to be a trait in the playoffs that you can get away with a little bit more physicality. And then to me, Naz Reid and the emergence, so to speak, of Rob Dillingham, even in his limited role, to me, it feels like this team has an out where I can start to buy him. It includes Donte DiVincenzo coming back and being healthy. It includes Dillingham being able to be viable, for the rest of this season and probably in spot minutes. But when I is that less reasonable than some of the other question marks we have for Memphis and Houston and Denver? To me, I look at this Timberwolves team and say, I can see what it is that would get them to the conference finals and beyond.
Yeah, I think that it's fair. I'll tell you, like, I have had a hard time getting my mind around this team all season long because, I mean, this last week is a great example. They have a 5-game winning streak, and they're
Right.
going into home games against Washington and Sacramento. And you're saying, here comes wins 6 and 7.
Yeah.
Right
Yep.
now, they could be on a 9-game winning streak, and they lose those games. Now, Washington, they had their top 4 guys out. They were really, they were really banged up, but you got to win that game at home, and you got to beat Sacramento without De'Aaron Fox at home, and then they don't. But then they step into the ring against Houston and just pummel them and come out with it. And the one thing, when you look at what they have physicality. They have really started to focus on the offensive glass as their one repeatable sort
Yeah.
of thing that they can drive their offense. And that has been good. Jaden McDaniel's been really good on the offensive glass. Rudy Gobert's coming around. Even Conley does well that way. So that toughness is available to them. But also, what we saw last night is that there are some teams that have stars and there are some teams that don't. And Houston is a team that does
Yeah.
not
I agree.
have the go-to guy. And Ime Udoka said it right after the game. He said, he's like, must be nice to have a special player who can get buckets when you need them. Like they don't have that. And in playoff games, physical games, Wolves have that, and they have a number one guy who the ball can be in his hands and he can get to the line or he can get his shot, and you can build around that. And so for that reason, they are a team that, if they get the right matchups, can win multiple series in the playoffs. They could also lose to San Antonio in the play-in.
Totally.
Like that's just the way that this is going to be across the West, I think, this year.
There's no question. I mean, the play-in is going to be interesting this year because, to your point, Golden State, San Antonio, Phoenix, Sacramento, Dallas Clippers, those are the teams that are there. All those teams are capable of winning against any of them in a one-off series. So you don't want to be the worst spot you can be in is the 9 or the 10, because to have to win
Yeah.
2, no matter who it is, you're the best team out of the 4, but you have to win twice. That's just too tough. So I'm with you on that. But I think the Timberwolves might separate. The
Yeah.
questions for me are, one, what is the latest on both Randle and Donte DiVincenzo? Like, what's the time frame on both of those players?
So Randle is going to be out through the All-Star break. From what I understand, it won't be. I don't think it's going to be any longer than that. I think he'll be pretty ready to go after the break. It's a minor strain of his groin. Donte Divincenzo, I think it's a little later. It could be late February, it could be early March with the turf toe. It's a pretty significant turf toe injury. He is walking around and doing things. He feels like he will be okay and will be able to be back. But that's going to be a little bit longer thing. And it's unfortunate because both of those guys were finding their rhythms with this team right before they got hurt. DiVincenzo had stepped into the starting lineup and was really being a nice presence there, playmaker, shooter, defender. And Randle, for all of the angst around him in his game this year, those 3 or 4 or 5 games right before he got hurt, he had kind of assumed this playmaking role where he could play isolation defense in the post like they need, and it was really nice. So we'll see how they come back, but I think that's the timeline right now.
So Donte, I think, and this is what's tough about that timeline. Randle coming back first after an All-Star break, you think like, okay, that gives me an opportunity, to kind of figure some things out. But if you come back right after the All-Star break without Donte, there's a secondary adjustment period that happens, in my opinion. And that's the thing that I would be worried about if I was the Timberwolves is, oh, you got my head on legs there. That's what I would be worried about if I'm the Timberwolves is that when do you actually get to start and focus on whatever it is that you're going to do ramping up for the playoffs? And that to me is the concern I have. And then plus you just mentioned 4 or 5 games from Randle. That's the piece of this I'm not buying. And I don't know if I'll ever buy it. I love the team without Julius Randle. I love him in a tiny role. And okay, he's not being as aggressive on offense. All right. But I still think that he is a piece that is always going to be uncomfortable in terms of how much do we give to him. And so that would be my biggest concern, honestly, for this entire team.
It's been the biggest point of consternation all season long with the Timberwolves. Chris Finch really believes in Julius Randle. Just really kind of thinks that he is an offensive fulcrum for them. When you look at how he is deployed, it has been a non-starter to ask about, hey, do you bring him off the bench and put Naz Reid in the starting lineup? What I am going to be interested, Adam, in is this period of time while Randle is out and Naz Reid is in the starting lineup. If things come together and if this offense takes off in a way that was not there with Randle, there's going to be an interesting conversation to be had when he comes back, because I will say this, the first couple of games that he was out, they played poorly. They really missed his shot making. They really missed his creation. They probably would have won those games had he been in the lineup. But what you have seen the last couple of games is that Anthony Edwards is getting to the rim a lot more without Randle out there, with Naz Reid as the spacer at the 4 position. And that has been a problem for Ant all season long, is that there's just been a crowded paint that he has not been able to penetrate because guys can sag off of Randle, sag off of Rudy, even sag off of Jaden McDaniels, and just pack it. But with Naz Reid out there, he is a quick decision maker and he's a good shooter. And so to me, the question is, will the evidence be so overwhelming over the next couple of weeks that it causes Chris Finch to think about things and change it? I don't anticipate it, but that is something that we're watching closely here as they get closer to the All-Star break and play here.
Isn't the evidence already there? I mean, this is the tough thing is we're 2/3 through the season. We know what that starting lineup looks like, the traditional one that they'd had out there just with Randle. We know what the other ones look like. And then this number as well as anyone. The clutch time, they've been in the clutch a lot. I mean, they're a team that's naturally going to be in a lot of clutch games because it's not like they're super streaky or this, that. So you're always going to have that. And they just look so clunky. Now, I know the stat, I think I got it from your article, that since December 1st, they're now 20-13, 4th best defense, 10th best offense. Like they're really starting to figure it out. But to me, a lot of that has to do with these other staggered lineups they have. So I take your point, but at the same time, I would almost guarantee I know what the starting lineup is in game 1 of the first round of the playoffs. And I don't think it's the starting lineup that gives you the best chance.
Yeah, I mean, I think that has been the debate all season long, and Chris Finch has been just adamant. I think that there is an element of there's a concern that if you move Julius Randle to the bench, do you lose him from a mental perspective? All of that stuff, and I don't know if that's fair or not to Julius Randle, but That is part of the calculus of this. And is that the right way to make a decision? I don't know. I do know that you're right. There is an overwhelming amount of evidence that the fit is clunky. What I will give Chris Finch credit for is that we are seeing him be more inventive, creative with the way he closes games. He did not have Rudy Gobert on the floor late against Houston last night. There have been games where Julius Randle has not been on the floor late before he was injured, depending on what they needed. So Chris Finch may be stubborn with his starting lineups so far, but he has shown the ability to say, okay, I've got to get us to our best lineups in those crunch time situations. So I do think there is a bit of a reckoning, Adam, that is going to happen as we get into March, as the playoffs get closer, and as that sample size gets even bigger about who really drives this offense and how the pieces fit together. And the Wolves are going to have to maybe make some hard decisions because of that.
Well, let me ask you about my favorite player on the Timberwolves, and that's, of course, Rob Dillingham. I
Yeah.
love this guy. I'm so curious about him. And he's obviously fun. I mean, just a tiny little player with every skill, little joystick, the way he moves, has all the skills on offense. He's playing minutes, and his insertion into the rotation to me has mirrored the numbers we're talking about this run. I'm not crediting him. I think it gives you a roster now, a rotation that makes a little more sense. So how good is he? How good has he been? And what is the team saying about their hope for him in the coming 2 months?
So yeah, it's been, the fans love Rob Dillingham because he
How
is
can you not?
flashy and he is creative and he's all that. What I will tell you is one thing that is absolutely no questions asked apparent is he does things that no one else on the roster can do. Essentially,
For
he is
sure.
their best ball handler. He is electric getting around on the pick and roll and going downhill to the hoop, even if he's small at the rim. He can penetrate and get his own shot that way. Knocks down threes. He's a bit streaky as a 19 or as a 20-year-old rookie is going to be. There's going to be nights where he's 1 for 7. There's also going to be nights like last night where he comes in the third quarter and just gives 2 layups and a 3, and that's just a huge boost to the offense to help Ant take some of the pressure off him. The players love playing with him because as sort of electric as he is also a smart guy in terms of he knows where he is in the pecking order, and he's going to move the ball and he's going to get it to Ant. He's going to get it to Naz Reid, and then if he gets it on a secondary action or if he's like the third option, he's cool with that, and then he'll break down and get to the rim. So he's smart, all of those things. That said, defensively, there's problems, right? He is just really inconsistent right now, and I think Finch is really grappling with playing these high leverage games where there's so much on the line every single night and going to him, an undersized rookie, for any extended period. I think there's times where he absolutely should have played him a lot more and he leans on Mike Conley too much. But that's the coach in him, the I have to win tonight aspect of things, I think is serving as a bit of a detriment to Rob, because I think you just need to play him a lot, play through some of the mistakes, let him learn on the fly so that by mid-April, he feels really comfortable and confident in what he has to do out there.
Well, he's so fun, man. The last one I have for you, because I read your article in collaboration with Sam Amick. Quiet deadline for the Timberwolves, but it almost wasn't, because there was one Kevin Durrant that apparently was linked to Minnesota. I mean, what can you tell us about that? How serious was it? And, did you hear that news before the trade deadline? Was that written before, or was that one of those like, hey, we were close to some deals, we almost had KD? I don't know if you guys knew that.
Yeah. No, this definitely wasn't a, hey, I know that you guys are disappointed in us, let me give you this little thing. Like we almost got this done. That happens. Front offices do that to kind of like look like they're busy. Well, I had started to hear about it around probably Tuesday, that there were at least a little bit of, hey, we're looking around here, we're kicking the tires on this, because it became clear that Kevin Durant was pseudo available. And there have been a lot of whispers, I would say, for all season long, that KD and Ant get along great. They love each other, and that there's a possibility that eventually they could play together. And And so the Wolves absolutely looked a lot and looked hard at Kevin Durant and at possibilities for acquiring him. I think in the end, because they're a second apron team, because there are so many of these roadblocks that prevent second apron teams from aggregating salary, from doing a bunch of things, it just proved to be too difficult. Like they were going to have to move 6 guys, to make this work. And I think that ultimately they said, we can't eradicate our depth to this degree. So I don't think it was a situation where it was imminent, but I do think that they absolutely looked at a lot of different scenarios and said, what would it take? And do I think that this lays the groundwork for this summer for these talks to be revisited? 1000%. And I think it's going to be easier to pull off a deal in the summer. And so that is something that I'll be watching very closely, especially how Kevin reacts to his name being in trade talks. Going down the stretch and how that all works. You know how this league works. So this could be the beginning of the end of Phoenix. And if it is, I think you'll hear from Minnesota again in this.
That's exactly what I thought as I was reading the report was, okay, talks are happening. That sounds more like a setting the table for the summer move than necessarily something that was close to being pulled off, but you never know. Just final prediction for where you think Minnesota falls. Do you think they're in the top 6? Do you think they're in the top 4 in the standings when everything shakes out?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been, they're so sort of Jekyll and Hyde with some of the way that they've played. So I'm reluctant to say top 4, even though that's a very reasonable goal for them. But I look at, even some of the bad losses, they are 12-6 in their last 18. 5 of those 6 losses are by 2 points or less. They are that close to like figuring things out and getting on a run. So I expect them to be top 6, maybe 5, I think. But I think maybe top 4, I just can't get there with the team that's been so mercurial. And with the Lakers loading up and with, some other things going on around them. So I think Houston's going to drop out. And I think the Wolves can climb up in there somewhere. But top 6 should be the goal for sure.
Well, it's funny you say Jekyll and Hyde because, all right, Oklahoma City has not been. Memphis, surprisingly, has not been. The Nuggets, absolutely. The Rockets, 5-game lose streak, absolutely. Lakers, we know, absolutely. Clippers, Mavs, like every team is Jekyll and Hyde in the West, and that's part of what makes it fun. He is Jon Krawczynski, one of the best in the biz. You can catch him over at The Athletic. Thank you so much, man, for taking time to talk Wolves with me.
Man, I really appreciate it, Adam. Thanks for having me.
We got a new sponsor here on All NBA, the Lucy nicotine patches. 100% pure nicotine, always tobacco-free. Lucy breakers are nicotine pouches with an extra surprise. Each pouch holds a capsule that can be broken open to release extra flavor and hydration. Set yourself up with a subscription and have Lucy delivered straight to your door. They've got all kinds of flavors, including mango, cinnamon, pomegranate, mint, wintergreen, citrus, apples, ice, apple cider, espresso, berry, citrus, cherry ice, and of course they have 4 milligram, 8 milligram, and 12 milligram options. You can also set it up so it can get delivered straight to your door. Level up your nicotine routine with Lucy. Go to lucy.com/allnba and use the promo code allnba to get 20% off your first order. Lucy has a 30-day refund policy if you ever change your mind. Again, that's lucy.co and use the code allnba to get 20% off. I also want to tell you guys about FanDuel. The Super Bowl is here this weekend. It's the big game. Super Bowl 59, 1 game, 2 teams, endless possibilities, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether you're predicting the first touchdown, who will take home the MVP trophy, or the coin toss, FanDuel makes it your place to make bets and feel the thrill of every single moment. With live betting all game long, you could jump into the action, adjust your bets, and ride the wave of excitement from kickoff to the final whistle. This really is the funnest way. Like, I don't have a dog in the fight here. Don't really like the Chiefs. Don't have any connection to the Eagles. So what I definitely will do is be placing down some bets. Probably Saquon Barkley to score a touchdown. I like that one. Probably to go over 100 yards. Like that one. So you place some bets and then you have some skin in the game so you have something to follow along with. So just right now they have this really cool deal. New customers can score $200 when you make your first bet. You just place a $5 bet, and if you win, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. So download the app or head to FanDuel.com/AllNBA and bet with FanDuel, an official partner of Super Bowl 59. Must be 21 or older in present select states. For Kansas, in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, or 18 plus in present DC. First online real money wager only. $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut or visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800 327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Dallas Mavericks were without Anthony Davis last night, but they still get the win in Boston, 127-120 in a game that was not even that close. The Celtics made it feel close at the end, outscoring the Mavs 37-23 in the fourth quarter. I did not watch this game, but I brought somebody in who did and has expertise, obviously, on the Dallas Mavericks. He is Bobby Karalla from DLLS Mavs. Bobby, you've had a hell of a week, man. Have you slept yet?
Not much, Adam. In some weeks, days happen, and in some weeks, years happen. And this has been the longest year of my life, and it's only February.
I can only imagine, man. To be honest with you, sincerely, I can only imagine, because there really is no precedent for the week that the Mavericks fans have just had. And in the immediate aftermath of it, we saw a lifeless, spiritless performance from the Mavs, getting blown out in the first game since the post-trade. And you wondered if there would be a hangover from it, but it didn't happen last night. They get a blowout win, a very comfortable win. What happened? How did this game unfold? And what did you see from the Mavs that got him the win?
Yeah, the Mavs started hot, and it was mostly Klay Thompson. He had 23 points in the first half. And, whenever it was a really vintage Klay performance, right? Because for most of this season, Klay hasn't been really running off a lot of screens. They haven't really made it a point to try and get him involved outside of the first 2 or 3 minutes of the game. But it was all first half. They were spamming off-screen stuff, pin downs, curls. He was running pick and rolls with the ball. And that kind of dynamic impact on the offense is something we haven't seen much. And because he was mixing in a lot of buckets with all of his action, Boston really started paying attention to him and tilting the floor toward him, to the point where at one point in the second quarter, they were trapping him at midcourt with the ball. Like, I've never seen a defense overreact to Klay like that this season. And once that happened, it opened up the floor for guys like Max Christie, Donte Exum, Spencer Dinwiddie to drive to the basket. And, last night was a really well-balanced game for the Mavs. There were 6 guys that scored at least 15 points. That's the first time that's happened all season. Wow. And normally, whenever it's this really egalitarian offense, it starts because the defense is double-teaming Kyrie or Luka. But it was because of Klay now. And that was just really interesting to see, and it was really impressive.
Was this just a hot shooting game, do you think, from Klay? Or this is what he's used to, right? Golden State, it's a lot of off-screen action. In his heyday, he was getting trapped at the logo. And so when you sell me, all these players in double figures and these different types of things, it's impressive for a team to be able to mold and play a different style this quickly and have success with it. So what do you think it was? Hot shooting? Or do you think this was a deliberate, this is what they're going to try to establish as a new identity with the team?
I think it was a little both. I think if Klay is, building a house out there, if he starts 2 for 12 or something, I don't think the defense is going to react at all. But he was hot, but also they made it a point. So last night they ran 50 off-ball screens in that game. It was just the 8th time this season they've run at least 50 off-ball screens. 6 of those games have come without Luka. A couple more, they ran 20 handoffs last night. 8 of the 9 times they've run at least 20 handoffs came in games without Luka. And 7 of their top 8 games in terms of number of total drives have come without Luka. That's not to say it's better or worse. It's just way different. They run a lot of spread, high pick and roll with Luka from the middle of the floor, sometimes from the wings. But when that happens, he wants guys spotted up. There's not as much off-ball movement. But whenever it's Donte Exum bringing the ball up the floor, or Spencer Dinwiddie, or some cases even Kyrie, those guys don't necessarily have the juice all the time to break down their man one-on-one or to dissect the entire floor and the entire defense in the pick and roll. So you got to find other ways to create advantages, and in the games where they've played without Luka, oftentimes it's been super duper ugly. But last night it wasn't, so it was mixing in some makes, but also just attacking the defense in different ways that we're not used to seeing around here. And, I'm hoping that they can keep doing some of this stuff moving forward, because they just don't have that individual Hall of Fame isolation level ability from 2 spots on the floor to be able to just do it anytime they want. They're going to have to work harder for their meal every game now moving forward.
They have a bunch of off-ball or off-the-dribble players who can attack a closeout. I mean, obviously Kyrie Irving is good as it gets there, but Donte Exum is very good at this. Spencer Dinwiddie is very good at this. And then guys like Klay Thompson, Najee Marshall, they can attack a closeout. Because one of the big questions I have now without Luka, obviously you have an identity. The ball's in his hands. Everybody's a little stationary, a little stagnant. But as I go through the roster, you lose Quentin Grimes, but you still have enough guys that can put the ball on the floor and kind of do things. So I'm just curious if you think that's a winning offensive strategy. You're going to add Anthony Davis, who can create his own offense, obviously off by himself. But we talk about what the core of this team is. Do you think it's going to be off-ball action and then Kyrie, Donte Exum, Spencer Dinwiddie just trying to attack constantly and get into the paint?
Yeah, what we've seen a lot of, especially in the games without Luka, but even when Kyrie and Luka were both out there, is the Mavs are running a lot more like high post, kind of classic pivot, a lot of handoffs, even some high-low stuff where it's Derek Lively or Daniel Gafford at the free throw line or the nail or the elbow, and then it's PJ Washington trying to seal his man, or sometimes even Kyrie trying to seal his man. So it really feels like in some ways the Mavs are taking pages out of like playbooks from 2004, or even the 90s out there. It's pretty interesting. I mean, last night they were running floppy. Like in 2025, they're running floppy, and it was working. So, it's just really interesting to see. I don't know if that's super sustainable. There's a reason that teams don't run a lot of post-ups. There's a reason that teams outside of like the Nuggets don't run a lot of high stuff with their big man, like from 18 feet out, and also I think once defenses kind of realize, hey, Daniel Gafford and whenever Derek Lively comes back, they're not taking you off the bounce. So you can just kind of back up and just sort of do this and just be tall. The Mavs might have to adjust, but it is a new look now. It's a new look right now. And over the next 4 or 5 games, let's see if it works. And then you go into the All-Star break. You have a little more time to get in some practices and implement some new stuff. But one thing, Adam, that Kyrie said last night that was kind of made me a little uncomfortable is he was talking about how they're gonna count on AD to attract double teams in the post. And I just don't think that posting up AD. First off, posting up AD is good. He's good, right? But whenever you're supporting players or guys like PJ or Najee or Exum or Dinwiddie, I don't know that you need to double off those guys, or if you do, I don't know that you can punish them. So it's a little tricky. Last night the Mavs took 27 mid-range shots. That's a lot. So can they do this all the time and shoot 50% on them or better? We'll see. But if they are going to try it, I just really hope it works.
Well, one of the things that's interesting is I understand the idea of just dumping the ball into the post. I don't think Anthony Davis is a guy you do that at volume for. But when I look at the assists, and again, I didn't watch this game, but 32 assists, and Gafford led the team with 5. Almost everybody had 3, 4, or 5 assists that played rotation minutes, had 3, 4, or 5 assists. And when I think about throwing the ball inside, I think about, okay, dribble handoff game, off-screen actions, and you're going to force switches because chasing shooters around. So to me, when you get to switch and you're going to have Lively, you're going to have Anthony Davis, Gafford, PJ Washington, you almost always are going to have a mismatch on a switch. So for me, I look at that and I think, throw the ball down, you walk up the ball up down, throw it to AD. I don't like that. But you run this off-ball action and you create an advantage, and then you throw the ball down low. I like that. So to me, that might be the mold here that we're looking at is, and when you play that style, what happens is you end up with an assist total like you had last night, 32 assists, but it was spread out. So if that's the plan, I think I can get on board with it.
Yeah, and, one other interesting thing that they're doing now that Exum is back, Donte Exum has missed the whole season up until the last few games. But he's now kind of their de facto point guard. And J-Kidd is still relying on Kyrie as this off-ball combo guard kind of player. And what that does is prevent teams from doubling Kyrie, bringing it up the floor. Right. Because for all of Kyrie's unbelievable ability, he can beat anybody in the world one-on-one, with one arm tied behind his back. He is amazing. But he does sometimes struggle against ball pressure from 2 guys. OKC in those games, in the playoffs we saw it. OKC was blitzing him off these screens, and he was neutralized. He was scoring 15, 18 points a game, and he wasn't getting a lot of shots. But whenever he's off the ball, you can't double him. So he's running off a screen. Now he has an advantage. Or if Kyrie is going to run some high screen and roll stuff, maybe it is AD that he's doing it with, and you can't double off AD. What are you doing? Because then he's going to catch it. He's just free driving into the rim. So I think there are ways to implement some stuff to make Kyrie's life easier and to prevent double teams, to prevent that added ball pressure, because what's most important is getting to the playoffs healthy and in shape. Kyrie's been playing 36, 38, 40 minutes a game, and he just does not, at his age, maybe he does have the stamina, but I don't want to find out if he has the stamina or not to deal with double teams all night, every night for the next 2 months. Like they need to find a way to make his job easier, and I think that's one way to do it.
Well, he even played 40 minutes last night, and as I mentioned, it was a blowout. The Celtics, to their credit, made a comeback at the end that I think forced everybody to come back and play some minutes. But what you just mentioned, though, double teaming your point guard and just trying to wear him down, because even the guys that can handle it, it still makes the shot clock wind down a little bit, shortens your half court possession, and then just gets you fatigued over time. And we've seen this now. Teams like Oklahoma City, Boston, this is part of their core strategies. They have so many defenders on the court that they're going to try to force the ball into your second or third best ball handler. But this is one of the things when I'm looking at the roster, that's what Donte Exum provides. Spencer Dinwiddie provides. It allows you the opportunity to, if you're going to send me two guys on Kyrie, well, I'll have Exum bring it up every single time. I'll have Dinwiddie bring it up. And to me, I actually think it's a sneaky, underrated aspect. Like, all teams need to have that. Denver did not have it last year in the Minnesota series, and it's part of why they lost. Jamal Murray had to fight double teams up the court and then score in the half court with 14 seconds left on the clock. So I actually look at that, like, I'm trying to figure out this roster, and I look at it and I say, 3 very capable point guards that you can mix and match with everyone, and then guys who can handle the ball like Klay Thompson. So to me, I'm just trying to figure out strengths. I think ball handling is actually a strength of this Mavs roster, this new version of the Mavs roster.
I think they have a lot more guys than in recent years that can just make simple plays and simple reads. A couple years ago, the Mavs go to the conference finals. When Luka's driving, he's kicking out to, Dorian Finney-Smith or Reggie Bullock or Maxi Kleba, Josh Green. Those guys at that point couldn't really do too much. It was either take the open shot or swing it back out, and reset. But now Najee Marshall, PJ Washington, Donte, Dinwiddie, like you said, these guys can do something. They can't do everything. They can't dissect a 5-man unit that's set up against them. But if they have a little driving lane or a little passing lane, they can exploit it. It's just now that you don't have Luka to consistently create those cracks in the defense. Jason Kidd's got to design some stuff that can, or Kyrie or AD have to. So they have to create those little tiny micro advantages in different ways now. But they have more guys than ever before, including even last year's final team. They have more players on this team that can take advantages of those tiny cracks and crevices if they can create them.
I think that's actually huge, though, because what you're talking about is connecting passes, but also connecting, like, if you get the ball kicked out to you, you just said some guys you just have to reset. The swing pass is not an advantage pass. It's a reset pass, and now we have to start a new advantage. If you can take a half-step advantage, get past the first line of defender and swing it then, now you have a full-step advantage, and that compounds. And you're right, they do have a roster that seems to be set up for that. So that's one strength, and I'm curious your thoughts here. If I think about the Mavs' real strength with this new look with Anthony Davis, to me, it's front court athleticism. Gafford and Lively already are elite athletes, for the center position. Anthony Davis is defensively maybe the most athletic big, just in terms of how much different things he can do, lateral movement, vertical movement, all that stuff. So when I look and say, okay, what is Nico Harrison thinking? If we get beyond the absurdity of just, the Luka piece of this, which I think we have to kind of move on. But if I think about the team and what they're good at, they're going to be the most athletic and big front court in the Western Conference. And they have all these connecting players. Then you have Kyrie Irving. It's not the craziest recipe for success for me. Again, if we throw out how they got here, I look at that and I go, that is a real challenge. Those are 2 strengths that other teams are going to have to deal with in a playoff series. And they're both tough to deal with.
I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this because, I've spent all season on our show kind of bemoaning the reality of the situation, which is when Daniel Gafford is on the floor, the Mavs cannot switch. They have to play drop, which is really conservative. It's hard to not only prevent open threes, but it's also hard to cause turnovers. It's hard to do anything. Drop is just very safe. Whereas with Derek Lively, they were feeling pretty confident with him switching, even onto guys like Shea. He was guarding ones and really good ones, and he was holding his own in those matchups. And that just allows so much more flexibility for a team that does have a lot of athleticism on the wings and in the front court. But now that Lively, he might not be back until April, if not later, if not next season. Who knows? We don't get an update on him for another couple of weeks. But with AD out there, I wonder if they're going to put AD on the 5, even though he wants to play 4, to involve him in those screen and roll actions so that he can switch maybe. I don't know if they want him defending in space. Or do you put him on the 4 where he can kind of lurk as the sort of weak side defender that can swoop over and make a play as Gafford is playing drop? I just don't know how this defense is actually going to play out whenever it is an AD Gafford front court, which is what they're kind of stuck with for the next couple months.
Well, one thing that I think is different, first of all, is that Gafford, if he has to switch, and you're right, he could beat off the dribble by your quicker guards. But when you have Anthony Davis as your protector, he's one of the most mobile guys. So I think it makes it a little bit more palatable if you should do that. But the hope is, in my opinion, is that they now have a defense for both. And I know most teams right now switch everything is the most important thing. If you have to go to Anthony Davis at center, most of the teams you have to switch everything against are going to be a little bit smaller anyway. So if you have to go to Anthony Davis at center, PJ Washington at power forward, guess what? That's still above average height for your, or size and height for your 4-5. So their small ball, quote unquote, small ball lineup is actually the size of a traditional big ball lineup. But they have the option, if Lively returns on time and is healthy, they have the option to be able to put out a big ball lineup that's also switchy. So to me, again, this year, health will obviously determine a lot of this. But what I like about it is they can play big or small, big switch, big drop, small switch, small drop. And I think that's the thing in your front court that unlocks everything else and makes it easier for your backcourt players now to understand their assignment. Keep them in front of you as best you can and know that you have a protector behind you.
I think the one lingering concern that I have with that, though, is that unless they're going to make some radical shift to their starting lineup, like benching Klay or benching PJ, their starting five is Kyrie with Klay and PJ at the 2 and the 3, or interchangeably, whatever, and then AD and Gafford. Who's guarding the quickest guy? Like, PJ has been switched on to guys like Shea or Anthony Edwards multiple times throughout the season, and he's just, despite being a super athletic guy, I think he's better suited as a 4 defending 5s or as a 4 defending 4s. Like, he can defend beef. I'm not sure defending quickness is his strength, but I guess to your point, if you know that you have Anthony Davis behind you, you don't have to stay in front of your guy. You can just kind of steer him. So I wonder if that's what they do, if they just really rely on the Twin Towers back there and just say, hey, all I need to do is just get my hand on this dude's hip legally and not get called for it, and hopefully I'm going to get bailed out. That does take some pressure off you, but they're starting 5 without Gafford, or without Lively and with Gafford at the 5, it just foot speed could kind of be an issue on defense, which against a team like OKC in particular could, be a bit of a pain point. But until they get to that series, I'm not sure how many other teams in the West can actually punish them for it.
Is there a bigger 3-4-5 combo though than those three guys? Like, even Gafford, Anthony Davis, and PJ Washington. When you're just talking, because I'm a big believer in aggregate length. Like, if your team collectively has all this length, it is easier to say, hey, wall off the center of the court, which I know sounds easy, but when you have small guys, it's hard to wall off. It's a tiny little wall. PJ Washington out there, or even Gafford out there, it's like, hey, I can really close off, 8 feet of space right here and force him to the sideline, and you have those helpers. So I understand the concern, but part of me just wonders, none of those guys are not athletic. Like, so you're going to have weak side rim protection and help rotations that should be really quick and recoveries that are really quick. So to me, I kind of think that should work.
I hope so. And I mean, one of the other hallmarks of drop is that you're going to force a lot of skip passes, and that's a lot of length. That's a lot of length in passing lanes, and Kyrie is really adept at kind of sneaking around and jumping lanes and getting steals that way, poking balls out from behind guys. So, they are going to have a lot of wingspan. I think the only other team, at least in the West, that I can think of off the top of my head is Minnesota. That has that much length. McDaniels and I guess Randle isn't like an 8-foot wingspan guy, but certainly Gobert and Naz Reid. They got a lot of length. So, Minnesota could be that kind of team. And I think now, the Mavs match up really well with the Wolves. And they match up, I think, really well with potentially Denver. I don't want to scare you, but I think maybe even super athletic teams like Houston, I think all that length will help them too. And unless you draw OKC in the first round, you're going to have to play one of those other teams that are super duper ultra big. So, I guess zigging where OKC is zagging could be kind of interesting, but I still want that series. I know OKC and Mavs fans have kind of laid down their swords. Everyone is mourning this Luka trade, but I still want that series. I want to see what happens.
I want it too. And, even with Oklahoma City, first of all, I agree with you about Denver. I mean, there is one thing. Yoke scores on everybody. He has great games against everybody and every type of defense. But the toughest one, if you had to pick, what's the best option? It's clearly a tall, big body on Jokic, like a Gobert or a Lively, and then a roaming athletic big behind him, because Aaron Gordon's your starting power forward, and he's not a three-point threat. So you can kind of play extra help. And if that person is a mobile player like a Chet Holmgren or like Anthony Davis, to me, that's by far the best way to match up with Denver. So I agree with you. I look at this, and in a weird way, as great as Luka is, I think he made you better against a bunch of teams, but not necessarily Denver. And so I absolutely agree with you. The only thing I'll say about, like, when you compare Minnesota, because you are right, they're also long. I don't know if they're quite as big, because PJ Washington, one of the things I love about him is if he's going to be a small forward for a lot of these minutes, he's bigger than every small forward in the league physically. Like he can bully every single one of them. And so that's part of it is they have McDaniels. He's a string bean. You have Gobert. He's a string bean as well. I just think that Anthony Davis and PJ Washington give you a strength advantage that if you can work it properly, you can build your offense smartly enough, that'll be a tough matchup as well.
Yeah, I mean, they're really taking bully ball to the extreme, and they've beat OKC 3 times this season, all without Luka.
Right.
Granted, one of the games Shea didn't play, but in the 2 games that Shea did play, both were in OKC. And PJ Washington just said, like, none of y'all are bigger than me. None of y'all are stronger than me. None of y'all want this work. And in his 2 highest rebounding games as a Mav both came against OKC this season. So, I mean, he turns into a different dude whenever he plays against them. But now, if they do slide him down to the 3, he's going to be bigger than, like you said, he's going to be bigger than his opponent every single night. So, like, he could just be that bully all year long. He's a little loose with his handle at times. And when defending against guys that are more adept at defending on the perimeter, that could be a little bit of an issue. But, dude, I mean, he sees red whenever he's got a size mismatch, and he's going to have a lot of those. So I think the Mavs are, J-Kidd has joked a lot about how teams take too many threes, and yet the Mavs are still taking 40 or 45 threes a game. But I think those days might be over until they have to make an adjustment. I mean, I think right now the objective for the Mavs is to get as close to the net as possible every single time down the floor and just try and flex on guys after you score on them.
All right. Well, I'm intrigued by this team. What's the latest on Anthony Davis? Is groin strain? Is he expected to play on Saturday?
Yes. Yeah, he is going to play. I don't know about minute restrictions. There's been nothing. He's doing his intro press conference in about an hour and a half, so maybe we'll find out more. But the plan is for him to go, and it's against Houston. So there's a lot of athletic freaks on that team. He's going to be very, very busy tomorrow.
Should be an interesting one. Last one for you. It's almost been a week. It hasn't even been a week. You mentioned it was the longest year of your life this last week has been. Is there any intrigue from Mavs fans right now? Like, are people starting to say, like, move on from it to the point of like, okay, well, what's this? What's this new thing? Or is there still this feeling of what happened to us?
I don't know if that what happened to us feeling is ever going to go away. I'm going to be honest. I mean, even if the Mavs, it's just Twitter, so it's not real. But on Twitter, I ran a poll a couple of days ago. Do you hope the Mavs win the title this year? And 60% of the 2,500 people that voted said no. Said no. And it's only Mavs fans that follow me. So, like, I mean, that does speak volumes. Granted, it's just Twitter and everybody's mad right now. But, like, there's definitely a void in people's souls, and I'm not sure that a title will fill it. But last couple games, Max Christie looked pretty good. If AD comes out and goes for 30 and 10 and 3 blocks and a win, I mean, I think this team, the players themselves, maybe not the organization, but the players themselves have the chance to win the fans back or win over the fans by playing well and, trying to fix this thing. But in the meantime, man, I mean, to go from Dirk to Luka to being traded on a midnight on a Saturday is just, that's a lot. That's a lot emotionally to handle. And then to be laughed at by the team's GM. I mean, I don't think that wound is going to heal for a really, really, really long time. But I do believe the on-court product has the chance to hopefully win the fans back over because, dude, it's sports hate rules whenever it's about the other guys. Sports hate rules whenever it's kept in-house. I don't need that in my life.
Yeah, it's so true, man. It's so true. But I don't know if this is such an unfair question to ask you. What have you thought of Nico Harrison all the way up until Saturday afternoon? What was your opinion? Because I feel like he's made some really great moves.
He has. I think the thing that I like the most is that he or the Mavs, his front office, has not bought into sunk cost. They made a move for Grant Williams, and it did not work. And 2 months later, they traded him. They got Christian Wood, and Christian Wood was playing well, but they didn't like Christian Wood, and they did not extend him. They're not attaching themselves, for better or worse, to players that they don't believe fit their culture or their identity or their idea of what this team should be. Now, I don't think anyone ever expected that Luka would be on that list. But, for other guys, they have not demonstrated we got to go down with the ship on this one. They're quick to pivot. They're quick to move. And he's made some really bold moves at the trade deadline, and every single one so far during his tenure has worked. this is definitely the biggest swing that maybe anyone has ever taken at the trade deadline before. So we'll see if this one works. But I mean, I admire the guy's gumption. I admire his willingness to go for it and make the move. He lets him hang all the time, but I mean, this one is definitely, he's on another level with this one.
Sports are full of mixed emotions, and I don't think I've ever seen a mixed emotion like this, as evidenced by the poll you put out there of, I love my team and I hope they lose. Even if this was a good trade, I hope it doesn't work, because there's this other piece of me that just liked what we were doing. Here's Bobby Karalla, DLLS. You can catch him on the DLLS Mavs pre- and post-game show, as well as their podcast. Check him out. Bobby, thanks so much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
All right, before we get out of here, as we always do on Friday, we take a look at the weekend slate, the games coming up that we're excited for this weekend. This segment is presented by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com/AllNBA. Not going to lie to you guys. Tonight, Bucks at Hawks, that's an okay game. If you got no plans, I wouldn't tell you not to watch that game, but that's all we got on the slate, because the NBA's been doing this. The Saturday slate, that's the marquee. Nuggets at Suns should be great, although the Suns might be broken. I am so curious to see how the Suns play leading up to the All-Star break with all of the bad vibes and reporting coming out of Phoenix, Kevin Durant and trade talks. I'm curious to see if they have any fight or spirit left. Rockets at Mavs could be Anthony Davis's debut. Another game that's just so fascinating. Rockets desperately need a win. Mavs fans are in desperation mode right now with all the anxiety around the team. Pacers at Lakers should be great, especially if Luka makes his debut. I don't know if he's going to in this game. I know early reports were. So if he's playing, that one's obviously tremendous. Even if he's not, the Lakers have been playing spirited this last bit. Pacers are obviously on a roll. Thunder at Grizzlies, number 1 versus number 2. That one should be very fascinating. Celtics at Knicks, same situation. Top 3 teams in the Eastern Conference. So Saturday, man, make your plans. It might be as good as the Super Bowl with that slate. And then on Sunday, Sixers at Bucks. Not even Sixers fans are watching this one. James put this one on the sheet. Sixers at Bucks when the Super Bowl is going on with Philadelphia's team in it. You can watch that one if you're a sicko like me and Legs, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. We appreciate it. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Legs and I will be back together for 4 shows, plus our playback. You don't want to miss it. Remember, go to playback.tv/AllNBA show. You're not going to want to miss our Tuesday Red Zone style watch along. It's going to be incredible. Sign up now. Become eligible to get a free league pass. We'll give you a code to get free league pass here for the upcoming month so you can watch along with us. You're going to love it. Hit that like button on the way out. We'll see you guys next time.
Y'all silly like the mayor.